Hello there, I'm Nick.
And I'm Helena, and we both work at the MS Trust, a charity for people affected by MS in the UK. We are here to help you make sense of MS.
Thanks so much for joining us today on our podcast, Breaking It Down. Today we're going to be talking lots about smoking and what impact that might have on MS.
Yes, here in the UK, we got a big campaign going on at the moment. It happens every October. It's called Stoptober, and it's run by the NHS, which is all about getting people who wish to stop smoking the sort of right tools and help.
Yeah, it's a really helpful campaign, isn't it, that one? And within our helpline and on our social media, we get lots of people sort of asking us questions about smoking and how they can stop smoking, what impact smoking has on MS. So we thought it would be a good time of year to release a podcast like this one, Helena, didn't we?
Yeah. Now, we do know that this subject can get a bit heated. We noticed it straight away when we posted we asked you for some questions on social media about this. And we got quite a lot of comments like, I'm smoking and I'm not quitting. It's like the only joy I have these days. And it was almost like we were trying to take someone's cigarettes away. And And the same from the other side, you can get people who are like, yes, I stopped smoking and it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, for sure. So people are so passionate, aren't they, about, either stopping smoking or, as you said, people who still smoke and sort of don't want to be told, stop telling me not to smoke, which I, do completely understand as well. For me, if someone tells me to stop doing something, stop eating something, stop drinking something, it's like, that's the last thing that I want to do. Yeah. I will just want to go and do that thing more. So, we don't want this podcast to just be for people who are just have stopped smoking, used to smoke, don't smoke. We want this to be for everyone. So if you smoke, if you've given up recently, if you're thinking about giving up, we're not here to lecture you on what you should and shouldn't do. I think the aim of today is to talk about some of the research, talk to some people who have been through the smoking journey, and for you to be able to go away and make your own decisions about the information that you've got from us today.
And that's what we want to do all the time because we are an information charity, aren't we? So I will be chatting to Professor Richard Nicholas, who is a consultant neurologist who is also involved with the MS Register. And he has done a lot of research into the area of smoking. And so we will talk about what happens in MS when you smoke.
Yeah, and later on as well, I caught up with Caroline Smith, who is one of our volunteers from the MS Trust. So she lives with MS herself. She was a smoker for many years. So we kind of talked about her journey. It's really interesting just to get her insight on it and what's happened for her. But I guess it's probably best that we kick off with yourself and Richard Nicholas. Helena, how does that sound?
I think so. Let's get into the research. Hi, I have the honor today to be speaking to Professor Richard Nicholas, who is a consultant neurologist and works also together with the MS Register. And I believe you've done quite a lot of work around smoking in MS. Hi, Richard. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. Thanks for listening.
And just before we start talking about smoking, could you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit what you work with?
So I'm a neurologist and I work in Imperial Healthcare Trust, and we have a large cohort of people with MS, and we treat use all the disease modifying treatments. We also have a program where we do stem cells, and I also work in the UK MS Tissue Bank, and I work in the MS Register. So I see people with MS every day.
Sounds like you're fairly busy. So we're talking today about smoking, and I suppose everybody by now knows that smoking tobacco is bad for you generally, but what evidence is there actually that it's particularly bad for people with MS?
Well, I mean, this is something that's been developing over the years, and one of the big difficulties is, I think, as you said, smoking in itself isn't really good for us in general and affects the lungs and causes blood vessel damage. on people. So over time. So there's one way that smoking affects, because it causes other comorbidities. So it causes other damage in the system. And in MS, you're sort of slightly you're not functioning optimal in terms of your nervous system. So one of the approaches, in general, you're keeping your health good, is that if you can keep all the other bits of you working at its best, that's the idea of diet and lifestyle, then it gives you ability to compensate from that problem. So one is that smoking probably causes more comorbidities and causes lung problems. That affects oxygen, that then can affect MS symptoms. But the question has always been, has MS itself been affected by smoking? And there's a lot of data that's accumulated over the years from Nottingham, and we've done some data which shows that over time, smoking causes the condition to get worse a bit quicker than those who don't smoke about it. So, and one of the problems we have then was why, and is it just because people with who smoke have other things wrong with them? But it appears not so. So for a long time, it was shown that actually smoking causes damage that makes things worse about it. And the question comes is, how does it do that? And when you look at smoking normally when we ask people to try and stop smoking, your risk of cancer goes away after about 5 years, but your risk of stroke, so I also do stroke, as I say, your risk of stroke goes away very soon, and it's probably in an inflammation and effect on the blood vessels. And some work that we did some years ago with Professor Chataway on looking at simvastatin as a treatment, which is a treatment that affects blood vessels. So we're just completing another little study looking at how it affects blood flow. So the question is whether smoking affects the vessels, the blood vessels, that restricts that causes damage that then affects MS itself.
Oh, that's interesting. But what is it then that is sort of exactly bad about smoking? Is it a process, or is it what's involved, like the tobacco? Or
I think we think, I mean, I don't know all these answers absolutely, but we certainly think that the smoke itself is what the issue is. So it's not so much necessarily the nicotine side of things. It's actually the smoke itself. So that causes damage and inflammation in the blood vessels. And that's the bit, if you stop smoking, that goes away quite quickly. So whether you smoke, cannabis or whatever, it's smoking that we feel is the most issue about it. I mean, and the question then is, what if you do use things different ways?
Yeah.
And I mean, we're just looking. So in the MS register, we've been just starting to look at vaping. So because vaping, obviously they're nicotine sometimes, or nicotine free, but they have a lot of smoke. And is that smoke good for you? So that's the question. I mean, I think it's a question for a lot of health issues about vaping that we're still trying to understand. But certainly things like the nicotine patches and things like that, we feel don't have the same issue. But one of the things that we showed recently, which is, as I say, a lot of things says things get worse, but actually stopping smoking can make things better again. So one of the things that is really positive is that if you can stop, you do seem to then go back to what controls are over a period of time. So it does seem that things slow down again about it. So, there's almost it's a positive thing to do.
That's, I mean, that is definitely a nice thing, isn't it? Because it's not like, oh, well, I started smoking, so I might as well just keep on then, because if you actually can see a difference. You mentioned vaping. When we put questions up for the public for this podcast, lots of people were asking about vaping, because I think, I was thinking of it the other day. When you walk down the street, you don't see as many people smoking, but you do see an awful lot of people vaping. Is there a lot of data about vaping? I mean, it's really new.
So in the MS register at the moment, we've been collecting data for about 4 or 5 years. So I'm actually just today starting to write an approach to try and see if we can gather that data together. It takes a while to know if it affects MS itself the same way, but also who vapes and how vaping fits into the picture with people with MS, as I say about it. So is it people who stop? So one thing we did show is that if you smoke less, it's better. So basically, as cutting down is positive if you can't stop entirely. But then, realistically, people would change to something like a vape. And is that an issue about it? So I really don't know. And I think, we need to try and prove that for people for the future to know that.
That's really interesting. And you did mention cannabis as well. Is that something that's the MS Register is looking at as well?
Well, we know we have looked at cannabis. I mean, cannabis is a difficult area in MS. There's a sort of limited access, which hasn't really been helped by the government at the moment in terms of accessing it. But there's obviously the spray that Sativex spray that people take. There's things like CBD oil, which we're sort of not sure about how it fits into the picture. And then there's people who smoke cannabis. And in terms of taking cannabis in general, we generally feel smoking it is the thing that we don't really like about it. So when you smoke cannabis, you tend to do it without a filter. So therefore it's much more damaging to the system in general. And in people who smoke cannabis generally, it can cause problems around the mouth and ulcers and stuff like this about it. So the idea is to take it in different formats potentially about it, if people take it as they access it in different ways.
Well, that's interesting, because we spoke a little bit about whether tobacco in itself was dangerous or not, because obviously there's other ways for people to use tobacco. I come from Sweden myself, and the people do snuff a lot there, where they stick it under the lip, and I mean it's like far more common than smoking. You see everybody walking around with it sort of hanging out underneath their lip.
Interesting. We haven't. So in the UK, that's not the tradition. So I don't really have that. We don't have that much data on it. So I think it's really difficult to know whether that's, I mean, I know that in people who do that, it does affect locally, causes issues about people, but does it cause more general things? That's what I don't know. So you're right. There's lots of different ways people might do that. So we do actually work with the Swedish MS Register with Jan Hillert. So we can maybe talk to him about it, because I said our smoking data was it's very interesting, but it's also to try and see if it's the same thing that affects people, worldwide. Is this really something that helps everyone?
Yeah, because I suppose in the UK, I mean, things like, chewing tobacco, I've never really heard about that in the UK, but you certainly do hear about people in America still doing things like that. So.
Absolutely. No, and I think you can get now, and also something which is intriguing, because they've made vapes with tobacco vapes and heated tobacco. So there are all these different types of products which really gradually start to hear about. But obviously, in terms of a particular medical condition, it takes us years to really figure out what these are doing to, because obviously it's a lot of things happening to people, treatments and lifestyle factors as well. So all of those add together.
What about passive smoking? Now that's something we hear a lot about, but
so we haven't really got no real data on that to know. We think we don't know. We don't know about it. I think, given that there is some element of passive smoking that affects people, it's not unreasonable to think there is something that's there. And it's again, different countries, because obviously in the UK, you can't smoke in pubs and in restaurants. And it's funny when we go around Europe, even you see people, it's how people, so your exposure in the UK is certainly outside the home is much more limited than it used to be. Certainly I can remember going to carriages where everyone was smoking, train carriages, and now of course, I mean, there's nothing.
No, which is a nice thing, isn't it? But both my parents were smokers, and we used to go traveling quite a lot in the car, and I remember sitting in the back seat suffering, and it wasn't a pleasant thing. So I'm very pleased that there's laws against that now. So we mentioned a little bit about impact of MS progression. So is that like a proven thing then?
So we did it. So we basically took so the MS Register. Luckily, there's about 17,000 people who've taken part, and we've got about 5,000 sort of regular users, and they fill in questionnaires every 6 months, which is really. I mean, it sometimes seems, why am I doing this? But it really helps to, therefore we get we can work out how people are changing over time. And we've used some we've taken some advice from some German statisticians about how to try and look up what's happening over time. And we can then pinpoint to starting treatments or interventions. So we're able to see that smoking, when it started to cause more damage over time. So it affected your motor function in terms of walking and other function as well. But also, it's difficult. It also links apart to low mood. And mood is a complicated thing in MS, because people get depressed if they've got MS, but is depression part of MS, and how does it fit in? And then again with smoking, do people who smoke, so Anna Lara, who was one of my students that did smoke at the time, said, well, you smoke because you're depressed, or does smoking make you depressed? So all these interactions with mood is really important. If smoking helps people function, or they feel it helps them function, what are we doing? So, and that's a problem for all of us in terms of telling people to stop smoking. Is that really the thing? So obviously there's a health benefit, but then is there other benefits that people say? So it seems that people who smoke probably are more depressed in general about it, and they seem to get but as I say, depression comes and goes again, so we haven't quite looked at that with the smoking as how it improves, but because we're still trying to figure out how it interacts with that, and MS itself, so people can get lower mood in relapses when they get inflammation. So there's so many things that can affect your mood. It's difficult, as you can imagine.
It's really interesting, because again, when we posted that we were going to do this podcast and we were looking for questions, we got quite a lot of more comments than questions about people sort of saying smoking is the only thing I enjoy in life, you're not going to take that away, or my MS is rubbish and this is how I cope with it. And you can understand like the frustration with these people, because you don't want to try and shame anyone into stopping smoking.
And I think the problem is that if you stop smoking, we're not going to make you suddenly, people don't get as worse as quickly as they were, but they still can change. So it's not, that's what I mean, it's not magic about it. But for us, I mean, one thing is that it's about smoking, but also it sort of drives research into what's going on at a level. So if there's inflammation, so I think part of this was where simvastatin came in, is that simvastatin reduces inflammation in blood vessels. So in a sense, does that help? Is that how it works in MS? And in MS, in the brain, around the lesions, usually around the little blood vessel that gets blocked. So the idea is, does it help the blood flow, which feeds back into what people were saying some years ago about CCSVI, where they were doing this other, with the blood flow type problem. Is there a blood flow element to MS about it? So it's trying to optimize. And also when you're looking at hyperbaric oxygen, which also is something that allows more oxygenation. So it's trying to keep the brain functioning optimally. So the reason, I mean, I would argue it doesn't help longer term, partly is because it washes out of your system. So when you're in the chamber, it's okay, but once you come out, so that oxygenation helps you function more.
That's interesting, because we do get a lot of questions around that. Whether
it offers us a lot of, and it's a lot of, as I said, what we want is new approaches for new treatments. So obviously we're doing these the disease modifying treatments are anti-inflammatory, and that's where we've got these the big octopus trial and all these big trials starting, is to try and look at new ways of trying to approach the condition that isn't just giving more immune drugs.
That's really interesting. Actually, I mean, we mentioned MS Register. For someone who doesn't know what it is, would you mind sort of telling us a little bit? Because I feel like
so the MS Register
should be signing up for this.
Well, I mean, basically, it's a sort of ongoing study. So it's been going since 2011, and it's basically collecting people's with MS experiences of MS. And so BPU sign up, we get some basic information, and then we monitor people over time, filling out questionnaires. And I mean, now we've got over 1 million questionnaires in the system about it. And we just finished it. We started, I wasn't there at the beginning. I came on about 2017. And now we've got 1 million questionnaires. We've just done a collaboration with the US, with Sweden, Denmark, and starting something with the Italian group. So we're trying to get big answers, answer big questions across many areas which need lots of data. So it's really starting to fill in. And the idea is we're just doing some work with other chats. So we're doing work with Overcoming MS, which is a charity looking at diet. So we're trying to look at, with Australians, we're trying to look at diet approaches. As I say, we've been looking at smoking, vaping, and as I say, depression, all these elements to try and help us get more insight. But also it's sitting around trials like the octopus trial. So it helps, because the trouble is doing trials costs a lot of money, and and the trouble is they may not work. So by doing it online, it enables us to follow people longer term at a lot lower cost. So, and we can get the long-term answers, which is what we need in MS. All our trials are usually based on 2-3 year studies, and the long term, is it really helping?
Yeah.
It takes us, as I say, it takes a long time. And the same things like smoking. You stop smoking, well, things might get better. Some elements might improve. I mean, when people stop smoking, I tell people in general, I mean, in my normal clinic, it's about, well, if you've got breathing issues, they get a bit better after a few months, but there's no massive, positive about not smoking. But, how does that fit into you itself? Yeah. Getting these longer term. And again, with diet, I mean, there's a lot of, personally, I think diet's got an important role, but, it does take a long time to figure that out, and life's complicated.
No, it is.
So large numbers of people over a period of time enable us to start to answer those questions.
That's brilliant. We'll pop the link to the MS Register in our show notes. And I would say anybody who's listening to the podcast, especially the people who got in touch with us who are smokers and want to sort of continue with that, why don't you get involved in it? Because I think that you clearly are people who you guys want to hear more from and hear how it's going. And
I mean, I think one of the things that we haven't done is how do we, as you say, smoking has a role in people's lives, and how do you stop it? And I have that all the time, is that people, it's not just me saying, oh, you must do this. Yeah. I mean, the fact is, well, why? And there's a positive, but there's other elements to life as well, which are really important.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because quite often when we ask, MS nurses or neurologists, could you tell us one thing that you would tell people with MS? And most of them say, yeah, stop smoking. But it is really, really hard. I mentioned my parents before. My mum, she wouldn't, I mean, if you said stop smoking to her, you would almost get your telephone slammed in your ear, because it was such a part of her life. It was really, really hard. So I feel like that approach of actually trying to help people stopping, you really need to want to do it, because you can't really force anyone into it, can you?
It is hard. Yeah, exactly. And I think, actually, interestingly, having banning it from, say, pubs and restaurants made a difference to quite a few people, because that's where they use, it's sort of like a response and environmental with your friends, sitting. And so that's sort of, in the UK, it seems to make quite an impact on people about it. Because, as you say, it's a social, it's about, there's a lot of elements to that go beyond that. And your health is one part of you. Yeah. And there's a lot of life to get on with, and a lot of stresses to deal with, and that's stopping smoking doesn't necessarily help those.
No, that's it. So if you want to give up smoking, we talked a little bit about like nicotine patches and things like that. So you think those are sort of approachable ideas?
And there's some treatments out there, which normally, it's very difficult with the pandemic, but normally we'd say go and see your GP, and then they'd have advice about stopping smoking. Which is and that, I don't know how that's doing at the moment, but yeah, I think it's something about the smoke, that it's the element of it about it, and it's about that inflammation in the blood vessels, which I don't think, say, nicotine as such does. It's a sort of a stimulant to a certain point. So obviously nicotine has its own issues, but it's not the nicotine bit that we're really against or thinking about. And as I say, that's what's led us down this sort of treatment pathway, is that actually it's about as effective as a disease modifying treatment stopping. So that's
it's big.
It's significant effect. So that it's something that, and over time, that keeps people well longer about it.
Yeah, so it's a really, really sort of important piece of the puzzle to try and get some. And there, like you said, it is tricky now, because we all know that it's really difficult to get to your GP or see your MS nurse. But I mean, there are still stop smoking clinics and things like that out there, I think.
Yeah, and they're starting going again. But yeah, it's we've been through, I think as everyone probably knows, we've been through quite a difficult period.
Yeah.
And we haven't really, and for people with generally MS and people with disabilities, it's been a very sort of alarming period of sort of services changing so much that we're still, I don't know if we're really out of it. But I think the smoking services are very important for everyone. As I say, it does affect you in many ways, and that's the thing, that it's good to keep to try and do that for your general health about it. But also, getting out, meeting friends, doing stuff. It's about getting out there as well, which is all those bits.
Yeah, that's it. And especially if smoking is a big part of your social life, then maybe how can you how can you fit that into to life? It's a tricky one, but I think, you know, there's certainly, because of these big campaigns like Stoptober and things like that that's going around, there is information from other charities, not necessarily MS ones, but that you can.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when we started this, and we spoke to the team from Manchester about it, and they said, well, I hadn't really emphasized the importance of, so I think as us as MS professionals, really, we're sort of starting to say more about trying to get people understanding that, you know, earlier on into their, you know, as I say, why people, because as I say, but as you say, there's a whole wide range of products out there, which you know, we don't want to stop people being normal, and I don't know how all those products fit into the general picture.
But there will be more research coming out of that, because
but I mean, at the end of the day, we want people, you know, the most important thing is to be normal and be active and get out there and do stuff. So, you know, that's how does it fit into that? That's where people have their own views.
We mentioned sort of progression and things like that. How about smoking impacting other symptoms? Because you did talk about depression, but things like fatigue or...
we didn't see anything major from that point of view about it. And I think that's the thing, is that when you've got depression, that can affect fatigue and your condition. And so our problem with fatigue is generally one of the things is how you measure it. So it's very difficult. There's a bunch. I mean, we give treatments for fatigue in MS, and the trouble is they help sleep-related fatigue. They don't seem to help every element of fatigue. So I don't think it made a big difference. We didn't show anything major from that point of view about it. But I think fatigue is a problem. It's a real, and so and it sounds a bit odd. We say this about people. Some people are basically they're doers. So basically, they just do till they're tired. And some people, and so they're always just doing stuff. So what happens is, if they're feeling a bit better, they get more productive in that time, if you see what I mean. So they can do more, but they're still equally tired. So you sort of, it's difficult. So about 60%, 70% of all of us are fatigued. But in MS, fatigue, you know, is much, much higher, massively higher, and different for some about it. So we didn't see anything.
No, that's interesting. Well, I guess really just got a final big question then. What would you say to someone who lives with MS and is thinking about stopping smoking?
I mean, I would have to say in general, it's a good thing to do. It's not easy, though. I wouldn't argue that. Having support is important to do that. But I think, as you said, sometimes people sort of make up their mind that they want to do that. It's very difficult how people stop. Some people sort of take the packet and just say, I'm going to stop. But actually, for me, it's not uncommon that people go down slowly. So even if you can say halve it, you're starting on the right road. So I don't think you say, oh, it's such a lot, I can't do anything. Just a little bit's a start. And I mean, you know, when my mother was smoking, used to smoke, she stopped over about 5-6 years. She just gradually decided that she wanted to cut it down. So I think it's important for your general health down the line, definitely, about it. And I think in terms of your MS, you know, is it going to affect how some of the treatments work is another question we've been wondering about. But, you know, even cutting down is a start.
Yeah. So it's not,
and I think
it doesn't need to be
manageable steps. Manageable steps, I think, is really important. And, you know, so as you say, there are lots of things in life that some people link to that. And, you know, if you really think, oh, I'm going to stop, that's just not going to work. So you just have to be practical and say, well, I'll cut down one. And then the other thing is trying. I mean, we have been saying to people, you know, try vapes, try other things, which, again, I don't know. I mean, you know, these are other things, the nicotine patches, whether that's the element of it. So, but I think getting support, which is something that's slightly missing in that picture at the moment, is really important to help people. But don't feel you have to I must stop. You know, that's not really an approach. It's what's achievable. And there's so many different ways of doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really right, because I think the fear when you do something like this podcast, or bring out any campaign, people are just going to feel like, nope, I'm not going to listen to that because somebody's just going to tell me what I'm doing is wrong and it's bad. And
no, I think all these things, I mean, everything you do is, you know, there's so much to, I mean, it's not to put a medical condition down, but it's part of you. It's not defining always, you know, does it define everything we do? As you say, we see people and it's part of them, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
And as I said, at the end of the day, what's normal is about getting out there doing just stuff, about it. And for normal is very different for different people.
That's very, very true. Right. So if people want to get involved with the MS Register, is the best way to just type in MS Register in Google and find their way through there?
Google, absolutely. Just absolutely join up that way. That's the best way to do that. As I say, I think we're just about starting our look at vaping, and we're going to try and get a little bit more understanding about how that fits in with people who smoked and all these pictures. So definitely it'd be great.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So maybe we can catch up on and talking to you in the future about vaping then. That would be interesting because we do get so many questions.
You shouldn't do. Maybe you should do. I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Richard. It's been very interesting. And
Thank you.
Good luck with the research.
Thank you very much, and thanks for listening. And MS Register, and try and help us. Let's get some better we want new cures. That's what we want, new treatments. That's what we need. That's what we're trying to find.
Yeah, it's really important. Yeah. Get on there. Get on the register.
yeah.
Now, if this was a commercial podcast, here's where there would be an advert. But as we're a charity, we don't do that. So instead, we'd like to take the opportunity to tell you all about our fantastic resources for people with MS.
So our website is mstrust.org.uk, and there you can find lots and lots of information and resources for people affected by MS. So if you head over to our website, you can find some information on smoking. You can either head to the search bar and type in smoking, or you can go ahead and find our A to Z section of our website, where you'll find information about smoking and many other things related to MS too. So go and have a look for yourselves.
And now over to Nick's chat to Caroline.
Hi Caroline, how are you?
Hello there, I'm fine, thank you.
Oh, brilliant. So Caroline's one of our fantastic volunteers at the MS Trust. I was wondering, just before we kind of get going, Caroline, would you like to sort of just explain what you do in your volunteer role?
Right, yeah, I'm actually a moderator on the MS Trust Facebook page, so I kind of try to keep people in line and make sure that we're keeping on track of MS and not getting distracted, and try to do that. But I mean, going back before then, I did work on a project many years ago, the MS Forward View project with the MS Trust, and that's when I first got involved with the MS Trust. So been involved for many years now.
Amazing. Yeah, and it's we were just sort of chatting before we started recording, but we're all really thankful for the job that you do, because there's a lot of people in the Facebook group, and actually there's all kinds of questions that get asked and people needing support with lots of different things, and actually having someone like yourself to support us with that is just, is absolutely amazing. So we all very, very thankful for what you do, Caroline.
I totally enjoy it, and I think it's always the way that you're always going to get things that come up when it's not 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, when you as staff are not not really there. I know Helena appears out of hours. Actually, most people do seem to answer things out of hours as well, but it's nothing always, it's always going to kick off or something at Saturday afternoon or something, or Christmas or whenever.
Yeah, that's social media, isn't it? That's the way that it goes. But yeah, no, thank you. And I was just, I guess, just before we get going, I was just going to say as well, if anyone is looking for a bit of community support within the MS community, you can join our Facebook group. If you search Multiple Sclerosis Trust Group, you'll find it there. So you can also ask questions in there as well, and one of our helpline team will get back to you as soon as they can. And you can also, chat about your experiences. Sometimes it's just good to talk to other people who are going through what you're going through, and actually who know, who have been there. So do if you're looking for some of that community support.
And I think it's a great place to be. Everyone is really friendly, and you learn a lot. There's sort of symptoms that you maybe have kind of, sort of just put to the back of your mind, and then someone will say, oh, is this an MS symptom? And you kind of think, oh, I've had that, and you've never actually attributed it to MS. So you keep learning. So it's I still learn after all these years. So it's a brilliant place to be.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Thank you again. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us today, Caroline. Obviously we'll be talking about a little bit about smoking and sort of your journey with smoking. But before we get onto that, would you mind kind of telling us about your MS journey? So when you were first diagnosed and what you went through.
Yeah, I was actually diagnosed in 2008. Symptoms first started around 2006. That was the first time I was kind of hospitalized, not able to control my limbs really. And that was quite a sort of a scary time. And then we were sort of waiting for the next episode to actually get diagnosed. And so actually then officially diagnosed in 2008. I started on a DMT pretty soon after that. But my MS did progress quite rapidly in the sense that I don't get relapses. I'm now secondary progressive, been secondary progressive since 2011 approximately. But to me, I know a lot of people think that's quite negative being secondary progressive, but it's quite nice because I didn't like the worry of, I might have a relapse and wake up and not be able to move. I don't have relapses now, so it's not an issue. So for me, it's quite a positive, which is quite weird. Yeah, things are kind of pootling along really sort of, since then. And I just like to get involved with things. I do like speaking out. I am passionate about speaking out and raising the profile of MS and our journeys and getting the support and things that we need, which is one of the reasons why I get involved with the MS Trust, to sort of actually enable our voices to be heard. I think is really important. And I gave up work in 2013-ish, I think, was it 13? Yes. And so it gives me something to do, all this volunteering and things, which is good.
Wow, yeah, it's amazing to hear, and so important, as you were saying, to raise that awareness for others in the community as well, because it's just, I think before my partner was diagnosed, I didn't know that much about MS, and I'm still learning every day as well. So yes, I know it's so important. We really appreciate everything that you do for the community.
I just think it's something, if we're not raising our voices, who's going to speak for us almost? And I know that our voices are more powerful, and they make MS Trust much more powerful, because it's sort of it's us, and we're saying this is what we want, this is what we need, not just you saying, oh, that's what people with MS want and need. It's sort of, it's important, and I think it does give us something to do.
Definitely.
It makes me feel useful. I worked in the NHS for 22 years, helping people. That was something I was passionate about. That I can't do that anymore, but I can try and make things better for people with MS and for people with MS in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And even though you might not feel like you're having this the similar impact, like you are, I know that you are, because I see what you do every day for the group. So yeah, no, it's really important. But yeah, in terms of kind of smoking and the topic for our podcast today, could you tell us a little bit about your journey with smoking as well? When did you kind of start smoking?
I was 17, 18, I think, around that time, when I suppose a lot of my friends and everything, it was much more I suppose the thing to do, the thing that we sort of did as teenagers and things. And so, yeah, started in when I was around 18, and carried on smoking for 25-ish years. So long time when you look back on it, and actually starts it didn't seem that long at the time, but it was just sort of, I suppose it was something that I did, and wasn't really something that I wasn't that bothered about giving up, if you like. It was something, I suppose, I enjoyed it. It was me and my friend smoked, and it was that sort of thing, and it was just so it became part of who I was. And it wasn't, you know that it's not You know the health risks, but it's not something that I felt that I wanted to give up, if you like. So it was a long time of smoking, and I didn't have any kind of problems from it. It didn't make me breathless. It didn't have any sort of, I wasn't aware that it was causing any issues to me. So it was, I did.
Yeah, and it's interesting you sort of mentioned that social side of things, and I think that's how lots of us start smoking, isn't it? It's you know, you're with your friends, you're in a social group, or you're at work and you pop outside with, you know, other people who are having a break, and it's very easy to start, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, certainly, you know, when I started, well, it was, you were smoking inside. It wasn't something that, you know, you didn't have to go outside. People smoked in pubs, in clubs, in restaurants, or whatever. So it wasn't, you know, even when I went off to uni and things, I mean, it wasn't smoking throughout the building, but there was places where you could smoke inside, so you didn't even have to go outside. So it was much more acceptable, I suppose, than it is now.
Yeah, definitely. And so you sort of said it was about 25 years. You said that you smoked. Yeah, and what was it that made you kind of think, right, that's time to stop now?
I suppose it had been in my head. There'd been odd times when I'd sort of thought, "Oh, I'm going to give up," but I don't think I'd been particularly bothered about it. To be honest, what actually made me stop smoking was my GP.
Really?
Yeah. The GP I had at the time was, I had a really good relationship with them, and they never were kind of preaching about it. He would just go, "So when are you going to give up?"
Right.
And it was just sort of like, when are you going to give up? And I kept sort of going, I would sort of be going, "Oh, I'm stressed. Oh, there's this kind of going on," and all of that. And then he just turned around one time and just said, "You're always going to be stressed. You're always going to have an excuse. So when are you going to give up?" And that just kind of, I suppose, hit home. I don't know why at that particular point it hit home. And I thought, yeah, I am making an excuse. You know, there's no reason to do this. And we just kind of agreed this date. It was, I think it was 3 or 4 months time. Right. That's when we're going to give up.
Wow.
And yeah. So I would have to credit my GP at the time for just actually sort of like, you know, not preaching, not nagging, but just literally, I mean, when just, you know, stop making excuses and get on with it.
Yeah. They must have been quite a straight talking GP to say, you know, to deliver that information in that way, you know.
I think, to be honest, he'd been my GP through a lot of my issues with MS, with when, you know, my transition from relapsing remitting to central progressive. He'd been my GP. He'd been dealing with all my pain. He'd been dealing with when I left work. He was supporting me on leaving work. Where I lived at the time, I didn't have an MS nurse. So my GP was kind of key in my MS treatment, if you like. He was the one that I could go to all the time, whereas now I might go to my MS nurse. I didn't have one, so my GP was kind of filling that role. So he was very knowledgeable about MS, because he kind of had to be, not just for me, but for other patients. In where I lived then, people with MS tended to gravitate to that surgery.
Oh, wow.
They had a good reputation for understanding MS because we didn't have an MS nurse, and so there was quite a lot of patients with MS there, so they got all quite knowledgeable. And so I just had, you know, he'd been very supportive all the way through and helping me with him. So I think we did have quite a good relationship in that sense. And so, you know, and I think it was just that sort of, he obviously was comfortable with saying to me, so just get on with it. And I was I kind of took it from him, whereas I probably wouldn't have taken it from a lot of other people, if I'm honest about it, you know. So
yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it, just to have that relationship that sometimes you'll you'll listen to information that if it's given in a certain way, whereas some other people, you think, oh, I'm not,
Yeah.
don't lecture me or whatever, or whatever you're thinking, right? But
Yes. Yeah.
And so that was kind of you mentioned that was you sort of gave up.
Yeah, I gave up
in
in
your MS journey as well.
2014.
Yeah. And that process of actually sort of giving up cigarettes, how hard was it for you?
It actually wasn't. It still amazes me, because I'd tried at different points throughout, thinking, oh, I'm going to give up, and it was just like impossible. But I think I did have months to think about it, because we had this date, and I had sort of months to kind of think about it, and I just was like, right, I'm going to do it. So it was in my head, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give up on this date, and it was in my head for ages, and I didn't actually tell anybody, which I think helped as well, because then there wasn't the well-meaning people who think that they're being supportive, but actually it's just adding to your stress. So I didn't even tell my other half. I didn't, I said, oh, we've got a date. I've got a date. We agreed a date with the doctor, but I'm not, didn't share it or anything. And it was actually, I think, a couple of days before, and I was kind of like, oh, I should go and buy some more cigarettes. And I thought, oh no, I just won't bother. And I'll just see. But if I'm desperate, I can go and buy some more, because I haven't got to the date yet, kind of thing. And I think that just kind of almost gave me permission in my head that I could smoke or not, and I just didn't.
Wow, that's really interesting. You say, because some people they'll want to sort of share that with other people and have that kind of sort of accountability, or sort of shared journey, and then for someone like yourself, actually just keeping a low profile and saying, actually, this is my thing, and I'll get through it. It's really
I didn't want to make a big thing of it, because in the past I'd kind of said, right, I'm giving up then, and it's then, and you're sort of like, well, you're throwing everything away, and I didn't do any of that. I didn't even I think at the time I was smoking in the car, and I think it was about a couple of weeks before I even emptied the car ashtray. I wasn't bothered by it. It was it was a very, when I look back on it, I think that was really quite surreal, and I don't quite know how it worked, but obviously whatever clicked in my head, and it was right for me at that time.
Do you get any cravings, or were you kind of having cravings for them at all?
Nope.
Wow, really interesting.
Yeah, and I say, when I tried in the past, yes, it was it was horrendous, but it was. So I don't know. It just was right. I don't know whether all those months of thinking about it, and I did do a lot of thinking about it in the time leading up to when I was going to give up. So whether that kind of got me into the right mindset, it was really weird. And I mean, I have to say, I didn't have the sort of the cravings or anything. It was like, I mean, when the nurse said I should try going to decaf coffee, I mean, that was horrendous. I mean, that was cravings, and yet, I didn't have any cravings. I was giving up smoking, so I was like, this is weird, very weird.
Wow. Yeah. I can certainly, I know the feeling with the coffee. I think I might need one soon. But at the moment, there seems to like there are lots of nicotine products around, from vaping to patches to gum, and lots of things that people use either to try and stop smoking or to kind of replace teen intake. Did you use anything like that at all?
I did do in the past. And I didn't have to say, I mean, I used patches, and it just really didn't, it just didn't work for me. I've got friends who have sworn by using patches, and I think it just shows that we're all so different, what really works for somebody isn't going to work for somebody else. And sometimes I've got friends who vape, and that's really helped them to move away from smoking cigarettes. So I just think we're all so different. There's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely. And I think vaping is probably something that we'll cover separately, just because I think there's still that evidence base being built around what the effects are of it. But they're obviously, very much used a lot by lots of different people at the moment. So I think it would be interesting to see what the impacts are as we go forward.
Definitely.
In terms of kind of your MS symptoms, if you like, did you notice any differences after stopping smoking?
No, I didn't. I mean, looking back, I do wonder whether there's been, whether the smoking had some impact in how my disease progressed. I do wonder that, but obviously that's never going to know that. But I didn't notice that any symptoms got any better or anything. They're just there.
Absolutely. And in terms of maybe not MS symptoms then, but in terms of sort of overall health, breathing to sort of function, did you notice any differences at all?
No. The only thing that I noticed was that food tasted better and food tasted different. The sort of spices and peppers and things like that were much stronger. So I really noticed the taste, but not really anything else.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And I'm sure some people would kind of think, if they stop smoking, if they're listening to this, they'll stop smoking, and maybe they'll have, they'll feel much better in certain ways, and then some people might not notice as many differences, like yourself, and it's so individualized, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there isn't. I mean, there's not a one size fits all in the same as anything else, and so if you're sort of thinking, oh, I'm going to give up smoking, and next week I'll feel like a whole new person. Well, no, I didn't, but you might do, I suppose, depending what sort of symptoms you kind of have. You never know. You never know. Your pocket will certainly feel a lot better.
Did you notice that?
Definitely noticed that. Noticed that one.
And I mean, this is probably slightly off topic now, but just seeing how much a packet of cigarettes costs now is I mean, it's a lot more, isn't it, for people who smoke and who are smoking regularly. It's a big financial drain as well, isn't it?
Definitely, you do. It gets more and more scary each time. That's, I think that was quite a big incentive. Probably was quite a big incentive for me, actually, because it was not long after I'd given up work when I had to say early retirement. So having that extra money when you've had a cut in your income anyway was quite helpful.
Absolutely. And Caroline, you mentioned, so your GP kind of said when are you going to stop smoking in that way, but I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that appointment. How do you feel? Do you think kind of MS healthcare professionals, do you think they should have conversations about smoking with their patients?
I think that's a really difficult one, because I think it depends how you do it almost. I think, I was not aware until quite a bit after I'd actually given up smoking that my MS might be impacted by smoking. So I would quite have appreciated being told about that, and just being told, that there is evidence that smoking has this impact on MS progression or MS symptoms, and actually being given that information, but not being told to give up.
I'm with you.
I think, because I think that's always the thing, because you want to have a good relationship with your MS professionals, and if every time you go in to see them they're lecturing you to give up smoking, that's going to impact on your relationship with them and how you take notice of them, because you don't want to be told what to do. But I would quite have maybe appreciated just even if it was like a leaflet, or, you know, go and check this out on the, you know, on the MS Trust website or something, as to that's, because you know the health risks of smoking, you know, that's sort of drummed into you throughout your life as a smoker. Just the general ones, but you know, and I don't think I'd want my MS professionals to be lecturing me about that, because I think I know that already. But to actually just say, this is the evidence that it can have an impact on your MS, that might have been something. But not to do it every time you go to see them, not to lecture you about it or anything, but just to, you know, just maybe have a you know, this is the evidence, and leave it at that. Because I think we're all intelligent people. We're all, you know, we can make those decisions. And I think as a smoker, you kind of know it's maybe not the healthiest thing to be doing, but you enjoy it. It's part of your life. Sometimes it's one of the only things you've got. You know, you might feel that you've got to enjoy. And if every time you go to see someone, they tell you to give up smoking, or it's not good for you, give up smoking, you know, we have got a choice. And so it's that not preaching, but just giving you the information would be what I would have liked. Because I think, yeah, when I was smoking, I did not realize that there was evidence that it might have an impact on how my MS was progressing. So
yeah, and I think, you know, a good way to for me, if I'm ever told to stop doing something, I'll probably just want to go and do that thing.
Yes.
Like, stop eating this. Well, now I just want to go and eat that because you've told me not to. So it's that kind of that element of being lectured to, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and
probably won't help.
Yeah, you know those things. You don't need, you know, it's sort of like, I think if you want help to give up smoking, you will ask for it.
Yeah.
And yes, I know that there is a lot of, you know, the NHS do a lot of help, and there is all that help there. And, you know, as an ex-smoker, yeah, I knew that was there.
Yeah.
Didn't mean that I accessed it. But the more that people moaned at me to give up, the less likely I am to do it. And it does then have an impact on that therapeutic relationship with your team. So I think it's, give you the information, but just as a state the facts, this is what it does to MS, not lecture about anything else, because you just don't listen. And and you know, the appointments are short enough. You know, you don't want to spend half of your appointment with them lecturing you about something that you're not going to take any notice of anyway.
Yeah, very, very true. So I guess it's that the approach that you'd like to see is, you know, here's some impartial information for the risks and the benefits to smoking or stopping smoking. You know, have a look at that, make your own decision.
Yeah. And just and not keep going on about it. You know, you don't want them the next time you go back to, have you given up smoking? Have you because it just puts you off, and you just, it's not, to me, it's not right.
Yeah, and it is one of the most addictive things that exists, isn't it? It's one of the hardest things to give up is nicotine and smoking. So you know, it's not going to be an easy journey.
No, and it's you know, I do firmly believe there's a right time for everyone to do these things if they want to, and the more that someone nags at you, the less likely you are to do it.
Definitely.
Human nature.
Yeah, yeah, that's the way, isn't it? For anyone who's listening to us at the moment, who's living with MS, who smokes, and they're thinking about stopping, or they've got a bit of an inclination that they might like to stop at some point. Would you have any kind of word at all?
I would just say, you know, if it's something that you think you want to do, then go for it. If you think you need help, then talk to your GP or your practice nurse, or even your MS nurse, and get those sort of signposts. There's help out there. There's some really, I know a friend of mine used to work in smoking cessation, so you know, there's excellent clinics out there. There's excellent things, but you've got to be in the right place in your head to do it. and just, and you will find what works for you, and go for it.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Caroline, and thank you for talking to us today. And I know it's not an easy thing to talk about, your experience with MS, your diagnosis, smoke it, health. So that was amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to our interviews today.
I think it was interesting because both of them were sort of saying about that there's not like an instant kind of thing that happens when you smoke. Sometimes you think like, I will notice difference straight away, but it was interesting that both of them were sort of saying, yes, you might notice some difference to your breathing, but actually there might not be a huge big difference. But the one thing that I was like amazed was when he said, Richard said that stopping smoking is sort of on the same level of starting to take a DMT. That is massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really, really powerful statement, isn't it, Helena? It's, people living with MS who choose to use DMTs, they're making that choice for their health, aren't they, for the future, to kind of give themselves a really good chance of staying as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And actually to hear that if you make a lifestyle change, it can have a really big impact as well. So wow, I mean that's really, really powerful.
And it was interesting to hear him talk about other sort of things when we talked about not just smoking, but like actually that it's might be the sort of smoking, the act of smoking rather than what you are actually smoking that sort of causes it, which obviously means that there needs to be more research into things like vaping and other things that people are smoking, just to sort of see what that effect is. So watch this space, because I think we will definitely dive into this topic of vaping at some point when there is more research, because we get so many questions about it.
Yeah, something that I would want to know more about as well, because I think it's such a hot topic, isn't it? Vaping, and we have people who have stopped smoking but now use the vape, or you now have people who've never smoked before and just go straight to vaping, and it definitely seems to be more of a generational thing as well. So I think I'd be really interested to see further research into that and to see what the impact is for people living with MS and also in the wider population as well.
Yeah. And I think it was also really positive to hear about what he was saying about that it's not, if you find it really, really hard, the idea to stop smoking, that actually just cutting down will make a big impact straight away. It's sort of the amounts. And because we did see someone ask that question, didn't we? They said, well, I'm actually smoking 2 a day. How bad is that? And I guess the answer is that it's not as bad as, 10 a day. So it's still not perfect, but it's definitely an improvement. So I think it's such a difficult topic. And having, like I mentioned, lived with like 2 smokers. One, my mum, she never stopped smoking. That was like such a big part of her life. But my dad actually did managed to stop smoking. He had a heart attack when he was really young, I say 48 years. And he was more or less strong-armed by the health professionals to stop smoking because of the heart issues. And but it was difficult for him, and I think he used patches back, because this was back in the 90s, so that was pretty much the options that you got. But it was difficult, especially when you have another smoker in the house, to sort of stop smoking. So I think I think she was even quite annoyed that he was stopping smoking, because it was their social thing. They sat and had a cigarette and discussed the problems of the world, and it is such a big social thing. So it's difficult.
Yeah, for sure. We see that a lot, don't we? As you said, is that, people saying this is 5 minutes to myself. This is, or social time, or time to pop outside with my friends at work. Or so, yeah, for sure. I think the main thing is that, I think the information is out there, and I think people listening to this can go away hopefully and think that there's a place that they can get to, whether that's cutting down, whether that's knowing now that they have the information and that they don't want to make that lifestyle change at the moment, or whether or not they want to try and do something like getting involved in Stoptober or giving up altogether. It's really interesting to hear from Caroline how she just she just went, you know, completely cold turkey, cut them all out.
Yeah.
Or you know, like sounds a bit like your father had that, you know, similar situation. And people take lots of different approaches to quitting. As you mentioned, like, you know, using nicotine products, using vapes, you know, going cold turkey. So hopefully, you know, as a result of us talking today, people might be able to be inspired to go away and think about what's next for them.
And I think also to say what we were talking about, me and Richard, that if you're not wanting to stop smoking, I think you could really be helpful for their research if you did get yourself signed up with the MS Register and fill in those questions, because then they can continue on, you know, doing the research whether to see what the long-term effects is with it as well. Because we're not here to tell you what to do. It's your life. You make the choices and the things. But I think anyone should sign up for the MS Register. It's a great thing, and it will really help, you know, for all kinds of MS research in the future.
Yeah, definitely. This could really impact, you know, people in 10, 20 years, as well as people right now, you know, who can get involved with that research and make a positive impact to the MS community, which is no small feat, is it, Helena? So
no.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to Stoptober, we have mentioned that a few times. It's an NHS campaign. So in the show notes or the YouTube links, if you're watching us, we'll add some links to their website. So on there, there's lots of tools and resources, apps that can help you if you are in the position where you want to either cut down or stop smoking. Do check that out. It's really, really helpful.
It's a really good website. I did have a little look just before we started recording, just to make sure that it was, you know, everything was still there and it was good. But and it looked good. So I would recommend to go and have a look at that if that's where you're at in the journey. And I think also we have to mention, as we are a charity, and if you're in that frame of mind that you feel like, yes, I'd like to give up smoking, but maybe you need some way to keep yourself accountable. We know that our fundraising team would probably love it if you would set up like a fundraising challenge for yourself. You can maybe write daily updates on how it's going. And I mean, that could be giving up completely or cutting down or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be smoking. You could do any kind of challenges. But this approach might work for some. I did try to give up caffeine a few years back. We've spoken about coffee before on the podcast. I think we're both quite heavy coffee drinkers, aren't we? So, and a few years back, I did try to give up, and I did do it as a fundraising challenge, and I did manage to keep off it for, I think, about 6 months, and then I fell back into it again. And I did feel very guilty about it because I'd done it as a fundraising challenge that I was giving up. But hey ho. But if you want to do that, there's some links to that as well in the show notes and in the YouTube comments if you want to have a go at that.
Of course. And if you have any questions about what we've talked about today or any of our interviews, whether they're about smoking or other aspects of life with MS, you can always get in contact with us. So we have a helpline. So that's available by phone. So that's from Mondays to Fridays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that's apart from UK bank holidays. So you can give them a call. That's 0800 032 3839. Of course, you can still call outside of those hours and leave us a message and we will get back to you afterwards. If you'd rather not talk to someone on the phone, if you'd rather, you know, ask your question via email, that's also fine as well. You can get in contact with our helpline team. That's ask@mstrust.org.uk.
And if you like talking to people on social media, we are out there as well. Caroline mentioned our Facebook group, so we'll pop a link to that too. You can join that and you can talk to the MS community and the MS Trust about various things. The helpline people are in there as well to try to pick up any questions. But we also have a Facebook page and we're on YouTube, X, and Instagram. We are also on Threads and on TikTok. You can find this podcast on most places that you would find podcasts, like Spotify, Google and Apple Podcast, and Amazon Music. And we'd love it if you would leave us a review of this podcast and let us know what you thought about it. And I guess see you for the next one.
Yeah,
Bye.
see you later. Bye.